Greetings, onliners. I'm glad to be visiting with you this week concerning the discussion board question that we had last week on the barriers to entry. I also wanted to commend you on how well you did on your exams. I'm very pleased with the overall scores, and it looks like many of you did pretty well on your exam. Now, the question that we had last week on barriers to entry used the airline industry as an example of high barriers to entry. And many of you did point out that, cash is probably the biggest thing that is the barrier to entry, because you can't just drop down to your local used car lot and buy a 737. And if we did, it would take just a whole bunch of money to have it and to buy it. Then the expenses only start, and many of you pointed that out. One of the things I wanted to clarify is that things like baggage claim fees and pricing of tickets are not really barriers to entry. They are just nuisance costs to us as consumers. But a barrier to entry are those things that would have to be considered on whether the money would be worth it to actually enter into an industry. Now, some of you had some really great ideas on businesses you could go into on with low barriers to entry, at-home industries, things like that. Financial services was mentioned, and the music industry was mentioned. There's a lot of things that are barriers to entry that may not necessarily be money, but the emotional costs of some things that required to take things, time costs of investment of time into starting businesses and things like this. You could say that a barrier to entry is, like so many things in nature that have natural defense mechanisms. You think of the porcupine or the skunk or anything like that that has just a natural deterrent from interacting. And barriers to entry is kind of like that in the business. They are things that are naturally there as a result of that nature of business to prevent people from entering into that industry without a full-hearted level of investment and commitment to seeing through the business as being successful. So barriers to entry are just that. They are those barriers to make sure that if someone is venturing into an industry, that they know what it is that they're getting into. Failure in business happens every day, and some industries can actually die because of people continually failing in that industry. Those industries that have a unique or a definite need to fill in society will persevere. And as we've seen, like in banking, for instance, everybody knows that banking is necessary, but fewer and fewer people are actually entering into the banks. In fact, as far as national banks, big box banks, we're seeing a reduction in them, and that there's only, maybe 3 or 4 left, a Bank of America or Chase or Wells Fargo. And even given some of the recent news about Wells Fargo, that entry into an industry, once you've cleared the barriers to the entry into it, staying there is yet another discussion. And you have to remain prudent. You have to remain conscious of expenses and just of being a good steward of that. So all in all, I think you guys captured the nature of barriers to entry very, very well. But don't let barriers to entry get confused with just costs of maintenance and costs that are passed on to the consumer or the customer as a normal course of business. So I'm looking forward to moving through the rest of the semester. We're kind of turning a corner and about to start October and making a mad dash toward the holidays. So keep up your good work, and I'll look forward to seeing you online. Take care now.